very honored to have Alimi and have Maria to join me on this conversation.
We, especially in the West, we are very much into this mode of understanding art for the sake of art.
Yeah.
In the sense that artists should have a position. Taste is not a criteria of art history.
What is the problem of the global world is, as I mentioned before, the fetish of authenticity.
It's so appealing for me to see where you have a Chinese artist, you have African artists, you have artists from Europe coming together based on their heart and their strength,
We are today in Lagos, not as a satellite town of a global art circuit, but as a center of thought, production, and urgency. People is always asking me why I'm interested in Africa, especially the rise of African contemporary art. I'm looking at it because my experience and being witnessing of the rise of Chinese contemporary art. So I'm here today in Africa now. We want to take Africa as from the beginning and we look outward. And I am very honored to have Alimi and have Maria to join me on this conversation.
Thank you.
So now I have to ask you, why didn't you move to other countries? What Lagos gives to you that makes it so different from the global art system?
Thank you, Pearl. Working out of Lagos, I think give a kind of energy. If you look at the city, Lagos, it's a very, very complicated city in terms of the lack of infrastructure. With that, we'll still try to create, there's a lot of stories to talk about. And if you look at the general global art system, there are actually expectations from artists, from Africa, that this is what African art is supposed to be. But as a contemporary artist, we are influenced by the environment, which is not the general environment in other parts of the world. And we are trying to respond, based on our own experience of the city. What I've seen, subconsciously, I've seen African artists in diaspora trying to respond to what people are going to connect with over there. And the work basically always take a different dimension, the depth of you working from the continent. And the power that comes from the work is basically the chaos, everything combined. There's an element which, when you place African art in a global context, you can see there's a kind of energy. And this energy is as a result of working on that, pressure, trying to, lack of electricity, still trying to create, from that environment. I think, I won't call it a negative thing. It's actually had a positive things to the work.
Many of your works are inspired by local emergency, what we call the local intelligence. But when it comes to global art world, it seems to be completely gone, disappeared.
As an artist, there is the way you communicate, which is we are not trying to create anything new. We're just trying to continue the general narrative, using arts elements, the skills, But personally, for me, the direction I'm taking is to kind of look at the Asian African arts and try to interpret it in modern things. Some people can really get it, But it's just continued the global narrative of what the old European masters have done, and as an African artist, trying to like continue the narrative basically.
You know, in the West, there is a very dominant genre that we want to put all the artists in, like migration, identity, and etc. and etc. and etc. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. The challenge is, I mean, if you look at the global art system, most artists, you know, always try to satisfy what the market demands. So authenticity is somehow lost in terms of you trying to talk about your cultural elements, you know, the philosophy, talking about the deity, the worship of old African religion. Hardly you find artists, you know, trying to explore this because it's more like a complicated themes that we feel the global system will never understand. And by doing that, we are not, I mean, like the Chinese always emphasize the calligraphy, it's ancient. But for contemporary African artists, we tend to explore modern themes, trying to reference the old, but in a very modern way. It's very important that you mention that we are not really exploring the meanings. Most times are always lost. Artists really we don't want to take that risk of not to be understood.
That also means that artists will be losing themselves because there's no way you can communicate because art is about communication.
Yes, I agree. In regards to me, that is why I'm trying to like reference the mask. What are old African styles that inspire the European masters. So that's
Actually,
what
I
I'm going.
I'm being like liking these African authenticity. I do like mask.
Yeah.
As a curator, Maria, I mean, how do you curate a show when your background is not really, not enough understanding of an African culture? Are you going to discount what we are saying like a Yoruba philosophy, blah blah? Are you going to discount this to make it into a global art language or art vocabulary?
For me, as a curator, the history of representations is very important. So no matter from where the artist is coming, I look very much at the place he's coming from, the traditions he's coming from, and the intentions he has or she has with the work, but also how all these collective experience are embedded in the work of the artist. So I would like to say that this talk about the globalization of art and so on, it's just an excuse to, reassert again and again the domination of the Western culture.
Exactly.
So precisely because I understand very well these mechanisms, I also look for artists who are not opportunistic in answering these expectations of the Western world. So what we have seen on the global scene recently, especially with regard to African art, is a kind of answer to that kind of picture of Africa these people from the dominant circles have. So that means it's their own projection on Africa, which is, answered with the works of certain artists, especially the diasporic African artists who are understanding how the mind of these people in these dominant circles is functioning. So I personally believe that this discussion should move away from what is expected or what is actually important and so on. What is important is for the artist is important. So in my experience, and I have 35 years experience as a curator, the intensity of the message and of the feeling which is contained in the artwork is making the work valuable. So if an artist is having his own voice, his own style, his own authenticity, no matter what the dominant circles, art circles globally are thinking, he will go on, he will pass through all these challenges and will be known. Of course, regarding Africa, there are lots of stereotypes. And I was just looking in the catalog of the Nigerian modernism, and then I was going through all this clicheistic way of how a country like Nigeria should be perceived from the critical point of view of the curators working in an institution, curators that maybe have never been to Nigeria. And that's basically saying a lot about the ignorance that is, how you say, everywhere, especially in the Western world, because they are only reading some pictures and then they have immediately an opinion about African art without understanding what Africa means and how large Africa as a continent is and how all these subcultures are coming together to create a fabric of different images, of different visions, and so on and so on.
You know, what always makes me laugh is when the whole world is talking about how bad colonization is, how bad it has been affected the early 20th century. The next turning point was that, okay, there's no territory colonization, but we would do cultural colonization. We have curators, we have Western curators coming in to China at the time. They will come and tell us what is good and what is bad.
Yes.
Without understanding our history, without understanding any of the basic things of our culture. You know, we have 5,000 years of culture. And of course, being Chinese at the time, because China wasn't strong like that, we just say yes, 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 yes.
Yes and no. I want to say that there is a reflex. It's a neo-colonial reflex. It's like inherited view upon the world. So, and this is very difficult to challenge. It's very difficult to tell to a British that he should really understand the other's perspective. You know, without, how can he eliminate this experience of hundreds, if not thousands years of domination of different territories? You know, so, but the point is, it's not about this their point of view. That's why art is so good, because art is challenging precisely these positions and these acceptions and perceptions, you know, while coming with something new and coming with something which is strong enough to convince the whole world.
Yeah, I think it takes time
for
for nations to become, or making the artists or making curators to become strong, with confidence in order to communicate. As an artist now, okay, of course, financial means is very important, and also the pride, the ego. And obviously, in Africa, there is not enough great museum which is at par with like the big museums in the West. MoMA, Pompidou, Tate, whatever, you know, whatever these museums. So ultimately, the dreams of African artists, the dreams of every artist other than Northern Europe, I mean, the dreams of every artist, including Northern America or Western Europe, you all want to be collected by these museums and also having a show there. So would you then bend everything, your approach, just to suit and just to adapt in order to have this language, your art language, that could be understood by this global art audience?
I mean, Maria pointed out if a art is good, it's good. But we've seen there's this stereotype of what an African art is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I know, they'll tell you, you're not supposed to know how to draw. The arts must be crude. And I keep telling people, for example, Lagos is a very cosmopolitan society. People are sophisticated, they school abroad. And, but the idea of what the West feel as African artists is not what we think African art is supposed to be. We've seen where you go to museums, you can see what they are showing, and we all say, oh, this is not, relevant to us. This is not how Lagos is. This is not a depiction of, our culture. But they decide to dictate to say, okay, this is what an African art is supposed to be. And it's actually, for the artist, is always the middle way to say, while you're trying to appeal to the West, you also must make sure the meaning are not lost, the culture is not lost. So it's actually a very dicey situation where for it to be collectible, you can't really do very challenging works because how is it going to be accepted at the same time? So artists are always trying to find this middle way, to say you're going to appeal to the museum, you're going to appeal to collectors. At the same time, the meaning must be there.
I believe that this perspective is wrong. I mean, you should not have in view this idea to please any kind of audience.
But it's very difficult.
It's very difficult. But on the other hand, if the work is growing and convincing, it creates automatically an audience.
I think I understand all that, but I think it's really difficult. Like in Asia or in Africa, now Asia, Hong Kong has a fantastic museum, but you want, if your own country has a museum or has institution, they are as par as those in the Western world, then obviously they don't need to create work to please, right? But then if you lose that opportunity, you do want, I think every artist wanted to have a big show at MoMA, right?
Of course.
If you have that,
happens.
what are you going to do then? I mean, are you going to bend or are you not going to bend? I mean, it's difficult because I always see one important point is until a country has a great infrastructure, then you can actually incubate fantastic artists. That's how I see what is happening.
I mean, my experience, and I'm talking here from an Eastern European perspective, and how the Eastern European artists have been, in the end, accepted and included in the European art. At a certain moment, those artists whose creation was very strong and whose creation influenced generations, different generations of artists, successive generations, they finally made it to the Tate and to MoMA because of the content and of the messages embedded in their work.
But Maria, isn't also because that they have joined a very established galleries that do a lot of marketing, and then they got all the curators in going through that.
It's true, but on the other hand, in certain cases in Eastern Europe, they were artists without galleries, but they were so dominant in the local scenes that they could not be ignored. And even if the local galleries didn't work with them, The content was there, and it was very important to be included in this framework that these museums wanted to establish. And of course, in Africa, things are different also because Africa is so big and Nigeria is so big. It has 200 million people and
multicultural.
Yes,
It's multi-tribal culture.
Yeah, so it's very complicated, especially here, to find the best artists because, as you said, there is no infrastructure. But on the other hand, the fact that there is no infrastructure,
it's actually make it more interesting.
Yes, because the artists have to strive to survive in a place where there is no infrastructure. And more than ever, the work has to be good.
Do you think that any African approach to art or the system would actually shape a global the art appreciation or art evaluation?
Yes. So I would like to point here two things. First of all, this influence of African art, especially the one from Congo, on the European modernism.
Yes,
the
early
Cubism,
20th century.
Modigliani, and
Yeah,
so
Modigliani,
on.
yeah.
So they were basically
Or the mask.
taking over a style.
An aesthetic is
an
always
aesthetic. Yes, it's like dealing with an aesthetic which only at the level, at the formal level. So it never went beyond beyond the form and beyond to the picture. It stayed there, and it was a seduction of a different kind of form. So what Alimi is doing in his work is actually like rescuing the the content of the initial contents of this African aesthetics. This ancestral symbolism and meanings by attaching it to his paintings. So that's why maybe he's appealing to this, the symbolism of the prehistoric painting, because it's a very raw and direct way of symbolizing the human experience.
Also, as African artists, they always say you have to play safe by referencing art history, but who wrote the history?
Yes.
So it's for African, we are not trying to say, just like when people say we want something back. It's just to continue the narrative of what some of the old masters have done. Personally, for me, I think that is my own direction, just to say, okay, I'm going to reinterpret this in my own way. As you said, the old masters just look at the forms. But in Africa, all the colors have meaning, deep meaning, because if you look way back, they are earth worshippers, and there are no artificial dyes. Every dye was actually got from plants and the rest. And every color has got a meaning in terms of, look at the indigo, it's very royal. When it's spring, the colors, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to explore the deeper meaning of beyond aesthetics and try. It's just to say also there's also a very spiritual angle that the Western audience would never really understand.
Because I see your work, because when you do the stitching, dyeing, layering, and all that, just represent labor. A few things about labor that also represent immigration. Actually, I see your work is like a Nigerian Lagos work.
Yes, because also for me,
textile,
the process, is very fascinating. That's why in my practice, there's different kind of hands, that a different team will do the dyeing, a different team will do the stitch. You can actually see through the effort and the whole process, which at the same time, I mean, when they talk about minimalism, we always figure out that it only belongs to the West or
Yes.
to Asia. Also in Africa, if you look at the forms, that's why we're having conversation in terms of, Maria said, oh, why the eyes? Why do you want to put the eyes on the painting and the rest? Because in Africa, everything is so reductive to the basic,
Yes.
elements,
It's a synthesis. It's a hybrid vocabulary that must come and create a synthesis of everything, of metaphysics, forms, pictures. And I personally believe that what you do is actually a process of recycling, both from the material point of view, also symbolical perspective and contemporary perspective. So it's like containing in one picture all this African experience and your own experience.
But why do we still use the word Africa, using a geographical, territorial description? Because I think artists and artists, this only because that you are in this territory, you reflect something out.
No, because
this
this aesthetics is very different.
Yes, the aesthetic is different.
From the European aesthetics.
Yeah.
However, yesterday, for instance, being with Alimi in the Lekki market, I have seen a sculpture that was almost a copy of a Neolithical sculpture that has been discovered thousands of years ago near the Black Sea, and it is called the Thinker. So it is a figure sitting with, keeping his head like this. And so I thought that it's actually a primordial language. Which is an ancestral language. It's this what Mircea Eliade, who was a very important historian of religions, said that it is the language of the sacred. And it is a symbolism before art really took a shape and started its development and history. So we are operating with different symbolical levels, and I believe that what he is doing, he's understanding his own, legacy, the legacy of this kind of local aesthetic, which is obviously an African aesthetic, but it's also a Nigerian aesthetic because this is very connected to this place where you are living and you are working and what you try to express.
I love the word that he said. This is actually very primordial.
Yeah.
Visual language, if you look at prehistoric, before they decide to say a place is Africa, a place is, Europe and the rest, I think we are all coming from the same source. And for me to start exploring cave painting, I find those symbolism very, very interesting because it's not predominant to a particular area. It's just a mankind of way of expression
and communication.
And there are different kind of similarities. That's why I find it fascinating to start using rugs, kilim, because weaving is actually in all cultures, different ways. So the Moroccan way of weaving, and as an African artist, I've seen when people say, "Oh, we don't have the license, the artistic license to say if you have to work with any material, it has to come from Africa." But every Western artist can actually use any material they feel like, and there's always a narration to back it up. But for African artists, we are like put in a box to say this is what is expected.
We are still talking about this craft as low art. It's only now like last 10 years, it has been relaxed because there's high art and low art, right? And when I first visited in Africa, they all told me that, Nigerian art, African art, we have to look at craft. Thank God, all these Western hierarchy of art form has been relaxed. And therefore, we look at things very differently. So go back to the global art system and go back to Africa. And Maria, do you think that globally, in the art world needs an African artist?
Of course, because it's not complete. It's a different kind of expression. And that's why the West has been so seduced, also historically seduced. If you look at Picasso,
yes,
and if you look to Modigliani, they were enormously seduced by this essentialization of form. This is what they are into it. The way in which you reduce the form to a very essential element, and also that is both expressive and symbolizing something which is bigger than the artist himself. I believe that we, especially in the West, we are very much into this mode of understanding
and also
art.
dominance.
No, art for the sake of art.
Yeah.
And this is a totally Western, invention, in the sense that each artist should have a position, and it should contribute to the renovation of the vocabulary and of the expressive language. So basically, it is this competition that we were, labeling as avant-gardes after avant-garde. So in fact, there is a kind of modernization the Western art went through, which happened because it was lots of activity, especially in the world's capital, like Paris and London, but mostly in Paris at a certain moment. And then modernization led to what we have now in the contemporary art. While here in Nigeria and in general in Africa, we have expressions that were not mediated. So they are direct expressions, they are very powerful, and they came, they went through everything, all these prejudices, difference of understanding the perspectives, the African perspective. So, and that is making everything much more interesting, because you have to judge and to look at these pictures or art pieces from a completely different perspective, because the Western-centric perspective will put a wall and say, it's not like this, it's too Modigliani, it's too Picasso, it's too this, or it's too that, So if you are not understanding the fact that they themselves basically
were inspired by the
not
Mars.
only they basically were using a vocabulary, so and every African artist has a right to make recourse to this type of vocabulary and to this symbolic imaginary, because this is what belongs to them. It's not like you are quoting Modigliani when you are making elongated figures. No, this is a symbolical way of representing certain things in the history of African art. Doesn't matter if it is Nigerian or from Cameroon or from Congo or Ghana, whatever. We have to learn to judge in terms of the history of representations. Because as you have in China, you have also these ideograms, that
calligraphy, you mean?
Yes. So the letters that are actually pictures. This is also an essentialized way of expressing something, you know? So what we have here in Africa is the same, but the forms are different, and you need to be open to learn a little bit, you know, and to find...
Do you think the art crowd has the time to learn?
And they
I
actually
mean,
refer them as art brutes, you know, but
Yes,
the
but-
West never acknowledged
No,
the contribution.
no. The point
roots is the most
the point
important.
is that the fact that they are now ignorant doesn't change the things. If they don't understand and they miss the point, they miss the point. The history is going to certify a certain evolution, no matter who is ignorant at the reception of these pieces.
So let me ask you, Alimi, when your work is being purchased or acquired, do you think that, I'm not talking locally, I'm talking internationally, how many of your collectors who acquired your work actually understand your work? Or they just acquire because they like the aesthetic?
A good question. I think for the artist, you're in your studio and you're making this work, you're trying to communicate, whatever the story is, whatever the theme is. And from my experience, people, different reasons, why people connect to pieces, and for the fact that there's this visual language, regardless of where the artist is coming from, there's a general appeal, that, people connect to a piece. For the artist, really, the work is not really complete because you also need the view, the eyes of the collector to say people want to live with your work. And occasionally, what people acquired and say, oh, what is about this? What is so special? Then you start having another view of why someone's able to connect to it, and for the artist, you start looking at, oh, there must be something about this piece. So generally, the artist really doesn't really care,
I think you just touched previously the point that you would create art, or you would be influenced the art by the market or by other hidden pressure. That is a pressure point, okay, sell, market, recognition, being accepted in an big international museum. So Maria is saying that no artist should adapt or should change or should comply. But for you, practically as an artist, you want to join. So am I going to not adapt, or I need to pay for my food, my rent, still have to adapt. So how much would you do in order to adapt? Or can you just preserve yourself and try to insert what you are about?
My take is, you will see the big masters, they were not really working for the museum. Picasso was painting the wife, was painting the kid.
At the time, doesn't have huge museum
exactly. They were just
like nowadays.
They were just documenting their life. I think if an artist you as an artist, you want to tell, communicate to people, not the other way around. It's always a trap of this is what the market accepts. As we were having conversation yesterday, and there's this trap of repetition. Collector wants you to keep doing the same thing because it is in their collection. The artist doesn't want to experiment.
I know about
It's
these
a
artists as
mannerism.
well.
It's
Yeah.
a
I know.
repetition of
I
the
know.
successful formula.
Yeah, I know, because an artist, I talk to many artists about this problem. A lot of artists doesn't have the confidence because when they change, the market doesn't take it. And I always say that maybe now they don't take it. If you keep on doing it,
Yes.
this is not your job. This is your gallery's job to make the market accept your work as a curator. It's not you. You should just express
Yes.
whatever you want to do. Is visibility, being seen, an empowerment, or is it an absorption? being absorbed to the global art system. All right? Of course, you feel empowered because, wow, but actually, you're being absorbed to do you are being absorbed into a homogeneous culture, a culture that called the global art system, global art culture, that people would understand. So, are you losing yourself or not?
Making art, I think there must be an audience, and for the artist, it's very fulfilling when you have the audience
Of course.
to, which I must say, there have to be this balance to be appreciated, to be shown in museums. We've seen early career artists, some artists are recognized late career, and so on and so forth. The purpose of making art for different artists, it varies. Personally, for me, it's fulfilling for me for people to decide to live with my heart compared to trying to look at museums, because I know museums most times it's not guaranteed for any artist. It's some artists, when they passed away, that's when they be recognized. But it has always been for me, for people to live with my heart, and which I find very fulfilling. And there's this, it's a personal experience I've experienced, that you make art in your studio, and you go to a collector's home, and you look at the art, and you see the power in that piece, and you start questioning yourself: how are you able to make this? Because if the work leaves the studio, it develops a life of its own. That's why the spirituality of art, when they say, when people collect art, the art in their homes, take the joy, the pain, all the emotions, get embedded into that heart. So that's what gives power, to say, oh, you see a thing that was made in 1960, and you can feel the energy surrounding that piece. So for the artist, it's a very, that's why curator, I know the role of curator have really, really evolved, that they are like the custodian to put the artist's work in perspective. So it's like, how can I put it? A symbiotic kind of relationship that's without one, I think it's very difficult for the artist to decide how the work is meant to be seen.
Okay, Maria, then. Is curator neutral?
No, the point is that as a curator, you need to learn to discern what good art means, no matter you like it or you don't like it. So because art has its own criteria of establishing what is really important and what's not so important, or minor, or judging art with intrinsic criteria of art and art history, and not in terms of market or of local importance and so on. So basically, professionals, the high professionals in this world, they have this grid of so-called universal criteria to define if a piece is indeed valuable, or maybe the term value is not the right one, but if the work is important for its time, for the aesthetical point of view, from the content point of view, from the local and global point of view altogether. So this means that it's very difficult for an artist, for a curator to decide. Of course, when you find something good and you like it, then you are in a wonderful situation. But as a former museum curator, I was in the situation to curate exhibitions of artists that I was not necessarily, having the same kind of so-called reverberation. Their work didn't speak to me. However, you have to make exhibitions, and you have to make good exhibitions also trying to understand that type of work, because for others, means also good work. You have to get out of yourself, and to judge strictly within a different framework, which is this framework that I mentioned, the framework of art itself. Taste is not a criteria of art history. Art history works and operates with different criteria. So as a curator, if you know how this the whole system is working, and basically learning from the history of representation and the art history, how the dynamic of visibility and of success has evolved, then you have a solution, so to say. You understand where you are, and where we are heading, and what kind of representations are important for now and for the future.
Okay, last question. Africa. Let's talk about Africa. I remember when I first came here, people tells me that, what is Africa? Africa is so many different tribes, so many different culture. You cannot say Africa is everything, because even in Nigeria, you have different tribal culture, and even that you cannot define. So how are we going to see the next stage of African art?
I mean, the categorization, as we said earlier, the British artist, I don't think there's that is a style that is, predominant, to a particular region. I mean, the same way look at the global economics, where the West will dictate up to the whole financial landscape, the same way is happening in culture. I mean, if you look at the other form if you look at the other form of creativity, like the way Nigerian music has been able to Afrobeat, take over the world. We have Nollywood that is very that are working
Even
without.
I watch Nollywood.
I think the world of art is the last, part of creativity that either we like it or not is going to be globally accepted in terms of the energy, in terms of what it is.
Can I add
Yes,
one sentence?
please.
Because I think what is the problem of the global world is, as I mentioned before, the fetish of authenticity.
You're absolutely right, because these stereotypes were necessary to categorize.
Yeah.
While we are now living in a global world where everything, all the informations are available. So there is no excuse that you are thinking or you are perceiving everything through a clicheistic way, or these, stereotypes upon each culture. So these cliches were important in the modern era, when you would put everything in little boxes, while now everything is so fluid that in the end, the only thing which captures your attention is this strong visuality, strong emotion. Art is a lot about perception. And if you see how art along the history, its history was perceived, so now we have also different modes of perception, while we have viewers who are stuck in ancient or in old ways of perceiving the world.
Not celebrating differences.
No, because it is threatening their predominant position. Pierre Bourdieu was saying it is who has the category of the appreciation is the one who makes the history.
Anything to add, Alimi?
Yes, I think it appeals to me when I see a gallery where there's a mix of different artists from different
Nationalities.
You know, there's always this stereotype. You see someone from the West, and the roster of the artists, everyone is African. You know, so it's so appealing for me to see where you have Chinese artists, you have African artists, you have artists from Europe, that everyone is coming together based on this uniqueness of their heart and the strength, you know, that their heart, you know. I think that is actually the global approach, you know, way for art to be more like democratized, you know, kind of to say, regardless where you're coming from. So I find that as the approach to the future, where Africans can have equal kind of footing, you know, in a global, you know, arts landscape.
Actually, I think to summarize and to close this discussion is what we are saying all along is we are not asking Africa to ban the system, but we are saying that there is two valuation system, completely two, because we have to use different factors to evaluate every different country's different culture. We just cannot use a Western predominant eyes of or gender to put, oh, this is immigration, this is labor, this is post-colonialism. We cannot just put everything, but we have to start afresh.
Yes.
Would you agree with me?
I agree,
Maria?
but I would say that there is only one way to look at art, to be open.
Yes,
With open
absolutely.
mind.
And to
not,
learn from it.
And not with a predominant, through grids, which doesn't belong to the artist or to the place where he's coming from. So what we see, we have this general mode of perception which is related to art, no matter from where it is coming, and then we have the different modes which are there to create a kind of dynamic within the art world, and basically trying to keep the status quo of the dominant centers for what we call these categories, or keeping their power of judging the value in the art world.
Thank you. Thank you
so
to
much.
both of you.
Thank
you,
you, Pearl.
Alimi. Thank you, Maria. And thank you for this really fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.